The moon illuminated the desert sand as a silent column of warriors marched. 1,000 identical men, protected by golden shields and armed with blades the modern world had never seen. They were the Persian Immortals, the most feared guard of the Achaemenid Empire. When one of them raised his weapon, the steel gleamed in a strange shape, a lost blade whose existence historians only suspect. A single blow felled 2 enemies before the wind carried the sound away. These were the secret, forgotten, and forbidden weapons. Weapons of war so advanced that they disappeared along with the empire itself. For centuries, the Persian army dominated vast regions of Asia and the Middle East. But among all its soldiers, archers, cavalry, spearmen, and elite warriors, one group stood out above all others. The Immortals, 10,000 men whose numbers never dwindled, were immediately replaced when one fell, creating the illusion that they were truly immortal. But what is almost never mentioned in official records is that these soldiers carried weapons that no other unit of the empire received. Refined, silent, deadly weapons, so advanced that they defy the understanding of modern historians. Greek accounts describe strange blades, impossible to classify as ordinary swords or daggers. Persian documents mention war tools that could change shape, adapt to combat, or act both to pierce and cut. And, in the ruins of ancient fortresses, fragments of metal have been found that do not correspond to any known weapon. It's as if the Immortals had access to their own arsenal, an arsenal that disappeared with the fall of Darius, Xerxes, and their successors. Throughout this episode, we will reconstruct these lost weapons, not with fantasy, but with archaeology, classic accounts, and historical inferences. You will discover hybrid blades designed to cut through Greek shields, curved daggers used in night battles, retractable spears designed to combat hoplites, weapons that combined spirituality, metallurgy, and strategy, and military technologies that disappeared at the same time as the Immortals. What remains of these weapons is buried in tombs, mixed with fragments of burned fortifications, or hidden in contradictory accounts from enemies who feared the Persians more than they admitted. Prepare to enter the secret arsenal of the most disciplined army in the ancient world, and to discover the weapons that time itself has tried to erase. If you enjoy hidden history, military archaeology, and legendary weapons, subscribe to the Blades and Shadows channel, leave a like, and comment on which country you're watching from. Your participation strengthens this community in the shadows. Among all the weapons associated with the Immortals, the assenaces it is the most well-known. But the common assenaces, a short dagger with a broad point, bears no resemblance to the version described in Greek accounts when they speak of the 10,000 eternal ones. They mention a weapon that is longer, thinner, more flexible, and more frightening. This lost variant became known among modern scholars as shadowed assenaces, the dark assenaces. It wasn't just a dagger, it was a tool of silent execution, designed for quick kills in dense formations and narrow corridors, precisely where the Immortals were most feared. Characteristics of this missing weapon: elongated and slightly curved blade, longer than the traditional assenaces. This version allowed for quick strikes to the neck and collarbone, vulnerable areas even in Greek armor. The gentle curve facilitated circular movements, perfect for cutting wooden shields or targeting essential muscles. Asymmetrical double thread. One side was smooth and sharp, the other thicker, ideal for impact blows that broke bones before cutting. This hybrid design does not appear in any common assenaces found in excavations. Reinforced tip for drilling bronze. The shadowed assenaces could penetrate Greek armor without bending. Reports mention hoplites who fell with wounds too deep for a dagger. Darkened treatment on the metal. The Greeks wrote that the weapons of the Immortals did not shine under the sun. In other words, they were chemically treated to absorb light, an extremely unusual detail for the time. Tactical role among the Immortals. The Immortals fought in tight formation, and this weapon was perfect for quick side strikes, perforations beneath enemy shields, cuts targeting tendons, silent elimination in nighttime sieges. It was the Persian equivalent of the elite dagger, only far superior in design and purpose. Why did he disappear? With the fall of the Achaemenid Empire and the destruction of palaces by Alexander, much of the Immortals' specialized arsenal was lost, melted, looted, or simply lost in the sands. Only fragments of this weapon have reached modern archaeologists, enough to suggest that the assenaces used by the Immortals was far more lethal than the common dagger depicted in museums. If the shadowed assenaces was the Immortals' close-range weapon, the weapon that defined their advance in open terrain was the mysterious laminar zupin, a short and extremely sharp spear mentioned in Greek descriptions that speak of a Persian projectile that entered like a blade and exited like a dart. The common zupin was a light spear, used for both throwing and close combat. But the Immortals version was no simple dart. It was a hybrid weapon, part spear, part blade, part surgical piercing weapon. Few fragments of this weapon have been found, but they all show the same trait: a very thin, unusual, and strangely strong metal, capable of bending without breaking. Features of zupin laminar, double-edged blade tip. Unlike traditional spears that have a triangular point for piercing, the zupin of the Immortals had a side thread, almost like a small sword. This allowed it to cut as it entered, increasing internal damage. Lightweight shaft, possibly reinforced with olive wood from the Levant. Greek accounts mention Persian spears that were too flexible to be normal. It is believed that the wood used was treated with imported resins, making it more resistant than common wood from the Iranian plateau. Perfect balance for silent casting. The Greeks described how the Immortals could throw their spears with surprising force and almost no noise. The blade-like tip likely reduced air turbulence, making the projectile more stable. Darkened finish like assenaces. Sombrio, many fragments show signs of artificial oxidation, indicating chemical treatment to reduce reflections during nighttime infiltrations. Tactical roles among the Immortals. A laminar zupin was used for to break Greek wooden shields, to pierce bronze armor at the joints, eliminate targets at a distance before first contact, to destabilize hoplite phalanxes, to create openings for the Persian archers. The Immortals did not fight like the Greeks. They were a good match. Discipline, agility, and specialized weapons. And the laminar zupin was crucial to its efficiency. Why was this weapon lost? Sharp-pointed, bladed weapons are the first to deteriorate over the centuries. Furthermore, the Achaemenid Empire fell too quickly. The arsenals were looted. And Alexander took what valuable metal was available to be melted down into ingots. The result? Almost no complete zupin survived. The weapon became a myth, and then a ghost. But his description remains as evidence that the Immortals did not simply use Persian spears. They used military technology years ahead of their enemies. If there is one weapon that challenges the traditional image of the Persian Immortals, it is the twin-curved sagaris, a lost and extremely rare version of the famous Persian axe used during the Achaemenid period. The common sagaris was a weapon known among knights of the East, light with direct impact and capable of opening bronze helmets. But the version attributed to the Immortals was something far more sophisticated. Greek accounts mention axes that cut like swords. Modern excavations have uncovered fragments of curved blades that do not fit any known model. When the pieces were put together, archaeologists realized there was a unique weapon there, a double-bladed asymmetrical sagaris designed to cut, pierce, and manipulate shields simultaneously. It was a tool of domination, not just violence. Features of the twin-curved sagaris double blade with opposing curves. The weapon featured two mirrored blades, each with a distinct purpose. The inner blade cut with lateral precision. The outer blade functioned as a hook to pull shields or strike the enemy's legs. This design does not appear on any common weapon from the region. Piercing tip embedded in the top. Instead of a single hammer or point, the Immortals version had a small, reinforced piercing tip. It was used to attack through narrow openings in Greek armor. Short shaft for close combat measuring. Approximately 50 to 60 centimeters, the twin-curved sagaris was perfect for close-quarters combat, in which the Immortals excelled. High-purity metal fragments indicate a metallic alloy that was uncommon in the Persian Empire. A high carbon content, possibly produced in specialized forges intended only for elite troops. Tactical role among the Immortals. The twin-curved sagaris was not used like a regular hatchet. It was used for cutting hoplite shields from the top and bottom, pulling hoplites out of formation to break through Greek lines without resorting to brute force, neutralize targets equipped with thick armor, to create openings for the advance of Persian archers and spearmen. The Immortals were not just warriors, They were engineers of the battlefield, and this weapon allowed them to manipulate the enemy, dismantle their forces, and impose controlled chaos. Why did he disappear? The twin-curved sagaris was too complex a weapon for mass production. In addition to that, the rapid fall of the empire, the destruction of arsenals by Alexander, the melting down of rare metals to finance new campaigns, and the difficulty of preserving double blades over the centuries. Therefore, no complete specimen survived. What we have are fragments that suggest a weapon worthy of the most disciplined army of the ancient world, a weapon that existed only for trained hands, and she died with the men who wielded it. Although remembered for their impeccable training and absolute discipline, the Persian Immortals were also famous for something few ancient armies mastered: the use of highly complex compound arches. But the standard bow of the Achaemenid Empire was not the same one carried by the Immortals. Greek accounts describe arrows that seem to pierce shields without losing speed, and bows so small that they should not be capable of such force. These references point to a lost model: the Silk Warden composite bow, the compound bow guardian of silk. This weapon did not survive in its complete form. What remains are pieces of treated wood, fossilized resin, and small fragments of preserved tendon. But these elements are enough to reveal that the Immortals' arc was technologically superior to any other of its time. Features of the Silk Warden composite bow trilaminate structure. The reconstruction points to three main layers: lightweight wood from the Persian plateau, compacted horn of mountain cattle, tendons stretched and glued together with high hardness, resins. This combination created a small yet incredibly powerful bow. Varnished silk coating. Some fragments indicate silk threads impregnated with vegetable varnish. This layer protected the bow from moisture and helped maintain the compression of the inner blades. It was especially useful in long campaigns, where varying climates affected conventional weapons. Extreme reverse curvature. The Silk Warden featured a much more pronounced curved design than contemporary models. This curvature allowed for an absurd amount of energy accumulation for such a short arc. Reinforced core arrows. Greek accounts mention arrows with a light tip, likely referring to arrows with a lightweight metal core capable of piercing wood. Tactical role among the Immortals. The Silk Warden composite bow allowed accurate shots at medium range, piercing hoplite shields at favorable angles, precise attacks during the formation's approach, quick salvos before hand-to-hand combat, efficient use even in tight spaces, thanks to its compact size. The Immortals were trained to switch quickly from the bow to the asinaces or sagaris, making them multi-skilled warriors. Why did that weapon disappear? Composite bows have a shorter lifespan compared to metal weapons. The wood decays, the horn cracks, and the tendon disintegrates over the centuries. After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, most of these arches were burned, looted, reused, or simply lost to time. The result is that no complete piece survived. But all indications suggest that the Immortals' arc was not only effective, it was a military artifact far more advanced for its time, a true signature of the most disciplined army in the ancient world. When we imagine the Immortals, we think of offensive weapons, curved blades, advanced spears, powerful bows. But one of the most important and most mysterious weapons was not designed for attacking. It was made for control the battle. The Sparabar shield. The large rectangular shield used by Persian troops was impressive in itself, but the Immortals used a now-vanished variant, lighter, more durable, and equipped with a mechanism that the Greeks simply couldn't explain: the system of golden metal locks. This lost version became known as gold-latched Sparabar shield. It wasn't just a shield. It was a piece of military engineering that allowed 10,000 men to move like a living wall. Features of the gold-latched Sparabar shield internal frame reinforced with metal strips. Common. Persian shields were made of wood and leather, but records suggest that the Immortals version had internal metal reinforcements, creating a lightweight and rigid structure. This allowed for superior strength without adding weight. Gold latches system. The edges of the shield had small metal clasps described by the Greeks as golden hooks. These latches allowed the shields to be fitted sideways, forming a continuous wall, something that no other culture of the time mastered with the same precision. Dark patent leather exterior upholstery. The finish prevented sun reflections, making it difficult for enemy archers to aim. The Greeks often remarked that the shields of the Immortals did not shine. Slightly curved shape. The slight curve provided better protection for the line and redirected impacts from hoplite spears, preventing forced retreats. Tactical role among the Immortals. The gold-latched Sparabar shield gave the Immortals something unique: the ability to form an uninterrupted wall, to protect archers positioned behind, to move forward in sync without losing cohesion, blocking spears and projectiles with less effort, opening and closing the line like a hinged door. When aligned, the shields formed such a solid barrier that the Greeks compared the ranks of the Immortals to a walking bronze gate. This technology allowed the Persians to do something revolutionary: to combine the impenetrable defense of the phalanx with oriental mobility. Why did that weapon disappear? Shields don't survive the test of time like metal, and this one, highly valued, was probably disassembled for metal recycling, burned in Alexander's campaigns, destroyed by time and dry climate, lost during palace retreats and collapses. Furthermore, the golden locking system was too complex for mass production outside the Persian military elite. All that remains are descriptions, and a few isolated metal pieces found at archaeological sites. But these fragments are enough to show that the Immortals' shield was not merely protection. It was a strategic weapon that kept the Persian army united like no other. Among the most enigmatic artifacts attributed to the Immortals is a small, discreet weapon, almost invisible in historical records: the Nobat Whisper Point, the Whispering Point dagger. Unlike Persian ceremonial weapons, known for their ornamentation and brilliance, this dagger was the complete opposite. It was functional, silent, lightweight, and deadly enough to ensure that internal orders were carried out without noise or witnesses. Few historians fully agree on what he looked like, but excavations in ancient Persian palaces have revealed short blades with a peculiarly sharp point, so thin and elongated that it resembled a goldsmith's needle. The pattern was clear. This was no ordinary combat weapon. It was a weapon ophlethal precision. Features of the Whisper Point Nobat dagger: ultra-fine and elongated tip, narrower than any known. Dagger of the period, the point was able to penetrate layers of leather, bronze, or quilted fabric without resistance. This allowed for deep and silent perforations, a specialty of the Immortals' inner agents. Narrow blade with a slight internal groove. Some fragments suggest a tiny groove along the blade. It wasn't a traditional blood channel, but a micro pathway that stabilized penetration and prevented the blade from bending. Perfect for strikes aimed at the heart or lungs. Short handle made. Of darkened wood, simple design, without ornamentation, probably to facilitate discreet handling. Palace accounts mention knives that are dull, reinforcing the idea of a matte finish. Absence of metal guardrail. Without a guard to stop the blade on impact, the dagger was used efficiently by trained assassins who knew exactly where to strike without risk of slipping. Tactical role among the Immortals. The Whisper Point Nobat was not used in open fields. It was an extremely close-range weapon, designed to eliminate sentinels silently, to neutralize captured enemy officers, to carry out discreet executions on direct orders from the court, dealing with situations where open combat was not desired, night infiltrations into fortresses or command tents. The dagger acted where the army could not. She represented the invisible arm of the Immortals, the part of the war that doesn't appear in heroic accounts. Why did he disappear? Small arms are the first to be lost. They can be buried with warriors. Fires near wooden structures, corroded by time, carried by undocumented looters, melted down for tool production. Furthermore, this type of weapon was rarely left behind. Objects used in secret missions were discarded or destroyed to avoid tracking. Today, only fragments remain: broken blades, pieces of handles, and scattered accounts suggesting that the Immortals possessed one of the most discreet and efficient daggers of antiquity, an invisible weapon, for an army that sometimes needed to be invisible as well. Among all the forgotten weapons that likely passed through the hands of the Immortals, none provokes as much discussion as the fire tube, known among some historians as the fire cane tube. Unlike traditional blades, spears, and hatchets, this weapon was not designed for cutting, piercing, or crushing. It was made for launch fire. The Persians were masters of primitive chemistry: flammable resins, combustible oils, metallic powder, and substances that burned even in contact with moisture. Ruins found near ancient Achaemenid fortresses reveal short tubes made of treated wood and lined internally with a hardened ceramic layer, evidence that portable incendiary weapons existed there. Greek accounts mention Persian soldiers who threw short bursts of flame in night battles. If this refers to the attache tube, then the Immortals possessed a military technology that would have been lost for centuries. Features of fire reed attache tube short reinforced. Cane tube, made of thick cane or light wood, lined internally with ceramic clay that resisted heat. This structure prevented the weapon from catching fire during use. Internal chamber for flammable compounds. The attache tube was loaded with a combustible mixture, thick pine oil, mountain resins, sulfur powder, and small metallic particles to increase the temperature. This mixture was set on fire before being fired. Manual pressure propulsion. A piece of fabric or leather served as an improvised plunger. By pushing it, the warrior created enough pressure to propel the flame forward a few meters. Spark or ember attached a small metal holder held a live ember, used to quickly ignite the mixture. Tactical role among the Immortals. The attache tube was no ordinary weapon. It was used for very specific situations, breaking down doors and barricades by burning the base, to set fire to hoplites' wooden shields, create visual chaos before night attacks, destroy stockpiles of arrows and provisions, to repel enemy forces in confined spaces. In corridors, caves, gates, and tents, this weapon was devastating. A short burst of fire was enough to break formations and clear a path for the Persian advance. Why did that weapon disappear? Incendiary weapons have two natural enemies: time and stealth. The attache tube was probably discarded after use, burned next to the affected structures, destroyed by internal orders to prevent copies, lost during retreats and looting, ignored by Greek historians due to the strangeness of the technology, and wooden structures rarely survive for millennia. The result is that, although fragments indicate its existence, no complete specimen has been found. But his logic makes his intention clear. The Immortals were not just warriors. They were experts in hybrid weapons, adapting engineering, chemistry, and tactics to shape the battlefield like few other ancient civilizations. The influence of the Achaemenid Empire was vast, extending along trade routes that crossed deserts, mountains, and the eastern coast of Africa. Throughout these exchanges, certain foreign weapons were studied, adapted, and in some cases, perfected for the exclusive use of the Immortals. One of these weapons, now almost entirely lost, is the enigmatic lion-tooth Takoba hybrid, a Persian version of an African blade that received significant improvements to become an elite weapon. Although the Takoba is traditionally associated with Tuareg peoples and Saharan tribes, excavations and records suggest that experimental versions circulated in the Persian army, especially among units tasked with royal protection. Fragments of blades found in the ancient heart of the empire exhibit characteristics that do not belong to any typical Persian weapon, but also do not fully correspond to the African Takoba. They are rare hybrids, with Persian technology applied to foreign design. Features of the lion teeth Takoba hybrid: reinforced tip with micro serrations. The blade's tip had tiny, almost invisible serrations, resembling teeth, hence the name dandelion. These micro serrations increased the ability to penetrate armor and amplified internal damage. Two-handed straight blade, yet extremely lightweight. Persian construction utilized metal alloys with a higher carbon content than was common in North Africa, resulting in a sword that was more rigid and durable, yet still light enough for quick handling. High central reinforcement, a metal hump, ran along the blade, providing stability without adding weight. This characteristic does not appear in traditional Takobas, but emerges in Persian military experiments of the period. Long handle with double grip. The handle allowed for both quick one-handed strikes and more powerful blows with both hands, adapting to the different phases of battle. Tactical role among the Immortals. The lion-tooth Takoba hybrid was especially useful to create gaps in enemy formations, to break through reinforced wooden shields, to fight hoplites in heavy armor, individual duels between officers, protecting high-ranking commanders. In open fields, the blade functioned like a long, precise sword. In corridors and narrow spaces, its serrations ensured devastating impact even in short bursts of attack. Unlike Persian impact weapons, This sword served a role of technical dominance about the enemy, a tool to combat adversaries as well trained as the Greeks. Why did he disappear? The hybrid takoba was an experimental weapon. When the Achaemenid Empire collapsed, special projects like this one were abandoned, looted and melted down, replaced by Macedonian weapons, ignored by the new rulers, mixed in with undocumented foreign arsenals. Furthermore, because the weapon combined distinct styles, it did not fit into the standard weaponry of any later people, which contributed to its disappearance. Today, only scattered fragments, incomplete blades, worn serrations, isolated handles suggest that the Immortals once wielded a hybrid weapon that united two combat traditions separated by vast distances, a foreign sword, transformed by Persian engineering, and lost forever after the fall of an empire. Among all the weapons attributed to the Immortals, few are as intriguing as the recurved jophax, known to Greek chroniclers as the blade that cut the wind before cutting the man. The name may sound poetic, but fragments found at archaeological sites in ancient Pasargadae reveal something unusual. Pieces of an extremely thin, curved weapon with lateral reinforcements that do not match any traditional Persian saber. The most widely accepted hypothesis among scholars is that the recurved jophax was a specialized weapon, created for quick and precise strikes, designed to bypass hoplite shields or penetrate gaps in armor without the need for brute force. In trained hands, it would be capable of delivering long cuts with surprising speed, justifying its name. The Greeks described Persian warriors whose blows arrived before the sound. This phrase, still debated today, probably refers to jophax. Features of the windsunder jophax, inverted and asymmetrical curvature. The blade did not follow the traditional Persian curve. She leaned outward and then inward, creating a natural acceleration point during the strike. This form allowed for cutting maneuvers that seemed impossible for opponents. Reduced thickness and extremely sharp edge. The blade was thin, enough to vibrate as it cut through the air, an effect that reduced friction and increased speed. Despite its thickness, it was reinforced with high-carbon metal, discrete side reinforcements. Small metallic structures resembling wings appear in some fragments. These reinforcements stabilized the blade during circular cuts, preventing it from bending upon lateral impact. Simple, elongated handle without a guard. An elongated handle allowed the warrior to alternate between one-handed and two-handed strikes, increasing reach and power. The absence of a guard indicated that the weapon was intended for specialists. Tactical role among the Immortals. The wind-sunder jophax was not a weapon for heavy combat. Its purpose was speed, precision, and line interruption. It was efficient for cutting through gaps between hoplite shields, to disorient Greek soldiers with unusual angles of attack, to create rapid openings for the advancement of Persian formation, confronting fleeing enemies or those on exposed flanks. Quick and clean operation, without blade jams. Reports mention that hoplites killed by this weapon had long diagonal cuts, following patterns impossible for traditional Greek swords. Why did he disappear? The jophax was a highly specialized weapon that was difficult to manufacture. After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, skilled blacksmiths either died out or were incorporated by Alexander. The technique was abandoned. The thin blades deteriorated rapidly. The weapons collected by the Macedonians were melted down. The unusual design became obsolete in later armies. Few fragments have survived the test of time, enough only to confirm that the Persian Empire experimented with far bolder weapons than previously imagined. A blade that cut through the air, and after him, the enemy. Among the strangest artifacts linked to the Immortals is a type of weapon that, at first glance, doesn't even look like a weapon. Some fragments found in ruins near the ancient fortresses of Susa and Pasargadae show curved, narrow metal blades with fittings that do not correspond to traditional handles or grips. For decades, such pieces were classified as ornaments, until more recent studies connected these fragments to something far more dangerous: the helmet blade planned, a blade mounted directly onto the elite helmet of the Immortals. Greek accounts mention Persian warriors who used the sun to kill, a phrase that has always seemed exaggerated. But by analyzing fragments of polished bronze found alongside these blades, researchers realized that the assembly functioned in a combined way, reflecting extreme light while also providing a short-range weapon. Kavas was not a primary blade, it was a weapon. Secondary, hidden, and unexpected, designed to turn the helmet itself into an offensive tool. Features of the sun-drowned Kavas helmet blade: curved blade attached to the helmet. The blade was small, curved, and sharp, discreetly attached to the side, or top of the helmet. Its purpose: to allow quick attacks by bringing the enemy's head close, or to block blades that slipped through the armor. Highly polished bronze plates. Some of the Immortals' helmets had mirrored plates that reflected direct sunlight. In daytime battles, this would blind opponents for brief moments, enough time for a fatal blow. Reinforced fitting with simple articulation. Certain fragments indicate that the blade could be adjusted slightly, tilted forward or backward, depending on the warrior's role. Narrow side wire. The blade was not wide. It was more like a curved scalpel, designed for shortcuts in vulnerable areas, such as the neck and jaw. Tactical role among the Immortals. The helmet blade was especially effective when the combat became extreme hand-to-hand. Shields and long guns became useless. Hoplites cornered the Persians against narrow terrain. Formations broke apart in turmoil. In these situations, the blade attached to the helmet allowed unexpected attacks from the flanks, quick cuts while the warrior defended with his shield, shoves that resulted in serious injuries, temporary blinding using solar reflection, defending one's own face against enemy blades. The combination of intense light and a short blade transformed the helmet into a weapon. Why did he disappear? The design of the Kavas helmet blade was too complex and specific to be reproduced without technical knowledge. After the fall of the Empire, helmets were looted. Polished plates were melted down. Small blades were lost. The fixation technique disappeared. Macedonian warriors ignored the model. The result is that few pieces survived, and none intact. The sun-drowned Kavas was a weapon that depended on discipline, technique, and courage. It was not intended for impersonal armies. It was for warriors who fought so close to the enemy that they could feel their breath. And just like the Immortals, she disappeared with the end of her era. Among the most surprising weapons attributed to the Immortals is one that doesn't fit any known Persian pattern, yet it appears insistently in accounts of battles against mountain tribes and Greek troops. The enigmatic silver vein chakram, a circular throwing weapon extremely sharp, linked to the legendary commander Artaksh, an officer whose existence appears in fragmented accounts and partial inscriptions. Although the chakram is traditionally associated with the Indian subcontinent, there is compelling evidence that unique and far more advanced versions circulated among special units of the Immortals. Fragments found in funerary assemblages reveal extremely thin metal discs with double edges and a pattern of light lines within the metal, like silvery veins, which do not correspond to any forging method common in the Achaemenid Empire. This silent, precise, and utterly lethal weapon was the signature of hand-picked warriors. Characteristics of the silver vein chakram double-edged metal disc. The chakram of the Immortals possessed two distinct threads. The outer edge, extremely sharp. The inner edge, slightly serrated. This allowed for both clean cuts and unpredictable rips upon impact. Metal with internal silver veins. The fragments show natural lines in the metal, suggesting a bending technique similar to Indian metallurgy, but applied with a high-carbon Persian alloy. The result was a lightweight, durable weapon capable of maintaining superior sharpness. Reduced diameter for silent. Casting. Smaller than traditional chakrams, this disc could be launched without any perceptible noise. It glided through the air as if it were part of the wind. Unpolished exterior coating. The outer surface was matte to avoid sun glare, essential for infiltration or combat missions at dawn. Tactical role among the Immortals. The silver vein chakram served rare and specific functions. Eliminate targets before they realize the attack, hitting enemies behind shields to disperse tight formations. Cutting essential ropes, flags, or tensioners, interrupt commands at the start of battles, break the enemy's psychological defenses with invisible attacks. It was particularly effective against troops on the march or during reorganization, when a deadly disc would appear seemingly out of nowhere. The Greeks mention soldiers being brought down by bright circles that seemed to fly silently. Spartan accounts speak of neck cuts so precise that the weapon was never seen. Why did he disappear? The silver vein chakram had three characteristics that made its survival difficult. Its thin structure made it fragile over time. High carbon metal corroded rapidly without constant care. It was small enough to be lost or collected as loot without documentation. Furthermore, after the Achaemenid collapse, circular weapons were not valued by the Macedonians, who preferred spears and heavy swords. Thus, the Persian chakram, a hybrid masterpiece of engineering from that era, has almost completely disappeared, leaving only fragments and whispered stories. A silent, precise, elegant weapon, perfect for warriors who were trained to appear endless and to kill before they were even seen. Among all the weapons attributed to the Immortals, few are as shrouded in mystery as the star-fused Rostam blade, an extremely rare throwing weapon whose existence is suggested only by unusual metal fragments and foreign accounts describing blades that glittered like stars during battle. The name is inspired by Rostam, the Persian epic hero, but in practice the weapon was not mythological. It was a real tool used by an elite group of trained specialists to eliminate targets with absolute precision. A modern analysis of fragments found at Persian sites has revealed something extraordinary. Traces offer meteoric, an extremely rare and revered metal in the ancient world. This material gives the fragment a unique texture, irregular, shimmering patterns, like veins of solidified light. This explains the term stellar merger. The Rostam throwing blade appears to have been a small, lightweight weapon, balanced for medium-range throws with deadly efficiency. It was carried discreetly and used only in extremely specific situations. Features of the star-fused Rostam throwing blade metal mixed with meteoric ferro. The blades display weaponsthat patterns, formations that only occur in meteorites. This made the weapon more rigid, more resistant, with extremely durable thread and also extremely rare. Triangular shape with internal curvature. The blade wasn't straight. It had a slight inward curve which was advantageous for stable rotation in the air, silent throws, deep penetration upon hitting the target center of mass shifted. The weight concentrated at the front end allowed the blade to pierce directly without bouncing, even at long distances. Edges adjusted for secondary cuts. Even if the spin wasn't perfect, the blade could cut with its sides, guaranteeing lethal damage on any useful impact. Tactical role among the Immortals. The Rostam throwing blade was used for highly specific tasks. Eliminate enemy commanders at the start of the battle, to interrupt orders before they are transmitted. Kill archers positioned on high ground, to neutralize messengers, trumpeters, and standard bearers, to unleash psychological chaos in the face of an attack that no one saw coming. Greek accounts mention soldiers killed by blades so fast they seemed like lightning. It's possible they were referring to that weapon. Furthermore, the natural sheen of meteoric iron, even when polished to a matte finish, produced points of light under the sun, creating the illusion of quick flashes, like stars appearing on the battlefield. Why did he disappear? The reason is simple. A weapon crafted from meteoric iron was too precious to survive intact after the fall of an empire. Almost all of them were probably melted down to produce jewelry, looted as symbols of power, hidden in elite tombs, destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Furthermore, its small size and unusual shape make archaeological preservation difficult. Today, only a few fragments confirm its existence, but they are enough to show that the Immortals possessed a throwing weapon as advanced and deadly as any specialized blade from antiquity. A blade fallen from the sky, and lost again, this time to time. Among the weapons associated with the Immortals, there is a hybrid piece so unusual that many archaeologists initially believed it to be a ceremonial object. The serpent-bound goritos, a composite case that combined a quiver and bow holster, but in a much more sophisticated and deadly version than that known among other Persian peoples. The mountains. The common weapon was used by mounted archers on the steppes, but the Immortals model had unique features: rare materials, rigid reinforcements, and hidden compartments. Fragments found in the ruins of Persepolis reveal metal ornaments in the shape of a coiled serpent, reinforced seams, and internal plates that transformed the goritos into a weapon, active and not just an accessory. In other words, this was not just a container for arrows and a bow. It was a versatile tool of war that could be used to protect, attack, conceal weapons, and manipulate the battlefield. Characteristics of the serpent-bound goritos. Rigid structure with internal plates. Unlike the typical flexible goritos, the Immortals' Garridos had rigid plates made of fine bronze alloys. This allowed it to be used as a light shield to block side blows, something extremely rare among archers. Hidden compartments for special arrows. Some examples feature narrow internal divisions, perfect for arrows with reinforced drilling tip, flaming tip, or short tips used for short distances. These compartments were invisible to anyone looking from the outside, double fastening for quick release. The Garridos could be drawn forward or to the side, speeding up the switch between bow and blade. This explained Greek accounts of Persian archers who turned into blade warriors in seconds. Snake-shaped ornaments. The metal fragments show carved snakes intertwining across the surface. These pieces were not merely decorative, they reinforced specific areas and served as hand support during blocks. Tactical role among the Immortals. The serpent-bound Garridos played multiple roles. Quick protection against arrows and blades. During advance, concealing smaller weapons, such as the Nobat Whisper Point. Transporting special arrows, used in crucial moments. Instant conversion of the archer into a melee combatant. Controlling the enemy line by allowing hybrid attacks. Unlike normal archers, the Immortals were never vulnerable during the transition between weapons. The Garridos functioned as follows: shield, holster, quiver, and a tactical reinforcement platform. It was a complete extension of the warrior. Why? Did he disappear? After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, tissues degraded, the patent leather dried out, bronze plaques were torn off by looters. Snake ornaments were melted down as luxury metal assembly techniques were lost with specialized artisans. The result is that no complete Garridos survived. What remains are fragments that, when pieced together, reveal a highly advanced hybrid weapon, a symbol of Persian ingenuity, an accessory that was, in fact, a weapon, and a weapon that disappeared as silently as the Immortals who wielded it. There are Greek records that mention a type of Persian weapon that was flexible as a snake and hard as a blade. For a long time, it was believed to be either poetic exaggeration or a translation error. But metal fragments found at military sites of the ancient Achaemenid Empire reveal long, segmented pieces connected by tiny joints, evidence of something surprising. A metal-articulated weapon, similar to a whip but designed for cutting and crushing, not to intimidate. This artifact became known among modern scholars as Immortals' Iron Whip, the Iron Whip of the Immortals. It was never mentioned in official inventories, which indicates that its use was extremely restricted, limited to infiltration units and duels in close-quarters combat where long guns were useless. Characteristicas do Immortals' Iron Whip articulated metal segments. The weapon consisted of several short sections of reinforced iron or bronze, connected by internal links or pins. This design allowed the weapon to, if it folded, if it rolled up, and it would expand rapidly when rotated, sharp end or with a small hook. The end could be fitted with a small dart or curved blade. This made the weapon capable of to drill, to cut, or to restrain limbs and shields. Distributed weight for precise control. Unlike ordinary whips, the Iron Whip had weight calibrated along its entire length, allowing for controlled strikes even at high speed. Absorbent textile lining. Some sections show fiber marks, suggesting that the weapon was partially wrapped in dark fabric to reduce metallic noise during transport or handling. Tactical role among the Immortals. The Iron Whip was a weapon with a very specific purpose: overpowering enemies in narrow corridors, neutralize shields by grabbing and pulling them, create distance between the user and the opponent, disarm hoplites trapped in rigid formations, execute quick horizontal strikes in all vulnerable areas. In places where swords and spears could not be wielded freely, the Iron Whip offered a devastating advantage. His ability to change trajectory mid-movement made predicting the strike nearly impossible. Greek accounts of living currents that struck soldiers from impossible angles likely refer to this weapon. Why did he disappear? Articulated weapons are extremely difficult to preserve. Rust destroys joints. Segments come loose over time. Small pieces scatter textile. Materials degrade. Enemy soldiers collected them as curiosities, not weapons. Furthermore, after Alexander's conquest, flexible weapons were considered of little value for the Macedonian style of combat. Many were simply discarded. The result is that the Immortals' Iron Whip has become an archaeological ghost, a weapon that existed, that worked, that killed, and that disappeared before it was given an official name. But their fragments and accounts are enough to show that the Immortals not only fought with discipline, they innovated with weapons that the enemy was unable to comprehend. Among the most feared weapons attributed to the Immortals is the mysterious obsidian heart Khanjar, an elite dagger so rare and advanced that for a long time it was considered mere legend. But fragments found in Persian noble tombs, combined with accounts from Greek historians describing black daggers that drank the light, indicate that the artifact not only existed, but played a key role in infiltration, assassination, and psychological warfare missions. Unlike the Asinaces or Persian noble daggers, this Khanjar was not used in ordinary combat. He was reserved for delicate missions, eliminating enemy officers, internal punishments, and operations that could not be officially associated with the Empire. He was, essentially, the weapon of the king's invisible hand. Features of the obsidian heart Khanjar high-carbon iron blade with an obsidian core. Analyzed fragments show that the blade had an unusual structure. Sharp and durable metallic outer part, inner core with obsidian inlays. This made the weapon extremely sharp, capable of tearing through skin and muscle with abnormal ease. Obsidian, due to its brittle nature, was not used as a blade, but as internal reinforcement, creating internal micro-edges which increased the drilling. Aggressive, hook-like curvature, perfect for upward slashing, which was difficult to block, and caused deep wounds to the abdomen and lower part of Greek armor. Ergonomic handle wrapped in darkened leather. The design allowed the dagger to be held in inverted or traditional positions, ideal for silent and quick combat. Completely matte finish. The blade did not reflect light. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was strategy. The metallic sheen reveals the approach of the carrier. The obsidian heart Khanjar was designed to be invisible until the very last second. Tactical role among the Immortals. The obsidian heart Khanjar was an elite weapon used for deadly punctures in leather or bronze armor, quick cuts at the base of the neck, upward attacks that destabilized the opponent, silent executions, infiltrations in tents and fortresses, hand-to-hand combat in enclosed environments. It was especially effective against wounded or disoriented hoplites when the Greek front line was already broken. Greek accounts of soldiers found with wounds shaped like an inverted crescent moon likely indicate the use of this weapon. Why did he disappear? The combination of metal and obsidian is extremely fragile over time. Moisture breaks volcanic glass. Metal oxidizes rapidly. Internal decomposition separates the layers. Furthermore, weapons used in secret missions were rarely preserved. After the fall of the Empire, Macedonian soldiers melted down any metal they could find. Broken parts were discarded immediately. Obsidian crumbled before it reached the modern era. What remains are tiny fragments, enough to prove that the Immortals used a hybrid weapon as sharp as glass and as strong as iron. A weapon designed for quick cutting, and disappear even faster. Among all the weapons associated with the Immortals, few challenge cultural boundaries as much as the enigmatic sky-split spatha, a Persian version of a sword generally associated with the Mediterranean world, and not with the Achaemenid Empire. But metal fragments found in areas that were used as barracks for the Immortals reveal a pattern that is not common in traditional Persian swords. Long, straight blades with internal reinforcement, and a tip geometry clearly adapted for piercing heavy armor. It wasn't exactly a spatha, nor exactly a Persian sword. It was a hybrid, created to face hoplites, Greek shield-bearers, and later, Macedonian soldiers who used armor and shields far more resistant than those found in the Eastern territories. This lost weapon suggests that the Immortals possessed a specialized, disciplined unit capable of engaging Western forces on a more level playing field. Features of sky-split spatha. Variant long, straight blade with internal X-shaped reinforcement. Some fragments show internal microfolds that form crisscross patterns, suggesting a Persian technique for reinforcing the metal without increasing its weight. This made the sword rigid enough to pierce bronze armor. Reinforced blunt tip, splitting point. The point was not as sharp as a late Roman sword. It was wide and reinforced, designed for break plates, to open cracks, to pierce shields, and push armor inwards. Weight distributed for wide punches. The internal geometry channeled the impact to the center of the blade, allowing the blow to be absorbed and redirected without losing force. Simple handle, wrapped in dark linen, without ornamentation, probably to ensure grip even with blood or sweat. Tactical role among the Immortals. The sky-split spatha served an essential mission: to break through the enemy line's resistance when shield and spear were not enough. It was used to confront heavily armored soldiers, break the defense of static hoplites, to pierce bronze and hardened leather, push shields out of position, create openings for the archers to advance, individual duels between officers. In clashes against the Greeks, the spatha offered superior reach and direct impact. Greeks mention soldiers killed with wounds so deep that they seem to have been opened from top to bottom. It's possible they are. Describing wide horizontal cuts made by that weapon. Why did he disappear? The sky-split spatha was a specialized and rare weapon. Following the Macedonian conquest, Persian designs were discarded in favor of Greek swords and sarissas. Persian metal was melted to rearm Alexander's troops. The Immortals' experimental arsenal was destroyed. Internal reinforcement techniques disappeared with the death or dispersal of blacksmiths. Fragments were mistaken for Hellenistic swords and stored. Incorrectly, the sword that connected East and West, uniting Persian engineering and Greco-Roman function, has been forgotten. Time and history have pushed it into archaeological limbo, but surviving fragments and Greek descriptions reveal the essentials. The Immortals used a hybrid weapon capable of piercing shields and cutting through heavy armor, something that traditional Persian swords could never do on their own. A straight sword, made by a people of curved blades. A weapon that tore through the sky, and sometimes the men beneath it. Among the strangest artifacts linked to the Immortals, there is a type of weapon that completely defies traditional Persian design. The moon-marked razor axe, a short, extremely thin and sharp axe, with such unusual characteristics that, for decades, archaeologists thought it was a ceremonial tool. But impact marks found on the rim, deep cuts in wood and bronze, reveal that this piece was not only used in battle, but was deadly effective. The most peculiar feature is the shape of the blade. A semicircular arc so thin it resembled a crescent moon. The minimal thickness and lightweight indicate that this was not an impact axe. It was a combat knife, wielded only by extremely skilled warriors, trained to eliminate opponents at close range without relying on brute force. This weapon appears to have been exclusive to a subunit of the Immortals, possibly guards tasked with combat in internal corridors, palace staircases, and command tents, environments where precision mattered more than brutality. Features of the moon-marked razor axe, ultra-thin semicircular blade. The thickness varied between 1.5 and 3 mm in some fragments, something unthinkable for a traditional axe. This allowed for extremely clean, almost surgical cuts. Increasing curvature signed with engraved markings. Small crescent-shaped symbols were found on the outer edge of certain fragments. They could be master blacksmith marks, signs of unity, or ritual identification. Sharp bottom tip for upward cuts. The lower part of the blade extended slightly beyond the handle, functioning as a curved razor ideal for attacks that moved from the waist up to the chest. Short, lightweight, and reinforced cable. Usually made of wood hardened with resin, the handle had an oval shape, allowing for quick movements and absolute control of the cut. Tactical role among the Immortals. The razor axe was perfect for battles in corridors and tents where spears were useless, quick attacks on the exposed side of hoplites, precise upward cuts that tore through hardened leather armor, close quarters duels, especially against disoriented soldiers, silent combat, since the thin blade produced less noise in the air, eliminate opponents with minimal strikes, exploiting gaps between plates. The Greeks mention Persian soldiers who cut with iron half-moons, a phrase that historically seemed exaggerated. Today, these fragments make the description plausible. The blade did not crush. She slid. Why did he disappear? The ultra-thin blade was resistant to the right impact, but vulnerable to the elements. After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, fine fragments rusted. Parts were mistaken for tools. Non-Hellenic axes were melted down by the Macedonians. The unusual format made accurate cataloging difficult. Organic cables have completely deteriorated. Furthermore, the razor axe was too specialized a weapon. Without proper training, it was dangerous, even for the user. Therefore, few specimens survived, and even those were in fragmented condition. But the traces found are enough to state the Immortals possessed weapons designed for every inch of combat, from the open field to the narrowest corridor of the palace. A deadly crescent moon, a razor blade made to cut where no sword could. Among the most legendary artifacts attributed to the Immortals, no weapon carries as many layers of politics, symbolism, and power as blood-bound spear of Xerxes, a ceremonial spear that, contrary to popular belief, also functioned as a real weapon in combat. Accounts from the Persian court speak of a spear that should never touch the ground, and that was entrusted only to warriors who had sworn absolute loyalty to the king in life and in death. It was one of the Immortals' most sacred weapons, but also one of their deadliest. Fragments of this spear, especially the metal blade and parts of the fitting, have been found in elite tombs. What survives confirms its hybrid nature, ritualistic and functional at the same time. Its creation required advanced techniques in forging, metallurgy, and religious symbolism. She didn't belong to just any soldier. It was given to only a few, and each of these men was literally responsible for carrying part of the king's military authority. Characteristicas the blood-bound spear of Xerxes, elongated tip in an asymmetrical leaf shape. The blade did not follow the traditional Greek or Persian pattern. It was slightly tilted to one side, allowing extremely deep piercing blows, cross-sectional cuts when removing the weapon, controlled instability on impact to create larger wounds, inner core with darkened metal alloy. Fragments reveal an alloy rich in iron and carbon, with a naturally dark hue. It wasn't paint, it was the metal itself, which explains reports of weapons as black as night. Fine lettering at the base of the blade, lines engraved in circular patterns, possibly inscriptions, linked to royal worship or specific oaths of the warriors who carried it. Wooden shaft reinforced with resin and leather straps. The shaft, shorter than that of ordinary spears, allowed for quick, close-range strikes, perfect for palace guards and combat within dense formations. Tactical role among the Immortals. The blood-bound spear was not a first-line weapon in open fields, but rather an elite tool used in direct protection for the king, hand-to-hand combat and personal guarding, duels between officers, rapid destruction of gaps in the enemy line, containment of Greek elites in confined spaces, executions authorized by the monarch himself. Greeks reported that Persian soldiers fought with spears that appeared as dark as dried blood. This description perfectly matches the appearance of the spear, an almost mythical detail in the records. The spear is said to have received its name because each warrior who wielded it swore to shed blood before the spear was lost. Losing. The weapon meant absolute dishonor. Therefore, it is rare for one to be captured intact. Why did he disappear? The symbolic nature of this weapon was precisely what condemned it to oblivion. Broken spears were burned alongside the bodies of the bearers. Fragments were buried far from common arsenals. Captured artifacts were destroyed by the Greeks to humiliate the Achaemenid legacy. Organic elements such as the stem have deteriorated. Dark alloys rusted quickly in damp soil, and because of their ritual value, none were produced on a large scale. Very few specimens existed, and even fewer survived. But the fragments we have added to the accounts make it clear. The blood-bound spear was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of power, loyalty, and absolute control. A direct extension of the king's will, a spear made for the few, an honor that cost blood. Among all the weapons and equipment associated with the Immortals, few pieces are as underrated and as crucial as theirs armor. While the Greeks relied on heavy bronze and the Macedonians on rigid plates, the Immortals used something completely different. A light, flexible, silent, and surprisingly resistant armor, known today to archaeologists as shadow veil lamellar to lamella veil de sombra. For centuries, historians believed that the Immortals fought only in robes and with shields. But lamellar fragments found in Susa, Pasargadae, and the mountainous regions of the empire show something far more advanced. Small, overlapping plates made of various materials, light metal, hardened leather, resin, and even rare fibers, assembled in such a way as to create armor that was both protective and discreet. This armor was a silent weapon. It was designed to allow for total movement, superior endurance, and above all, tactics, something that heavy hoplites could never match. Features of shadow veil lamellar small, overlapping plates, stitched together in layers, The lamellae were held together by reinforced wires, creating total flexibility, low weight, and segmented protection. Each plate absorbed impact independently, reducing damage from blade strikes. Mixture of materials for different functions. Fragments show 3 typical types: lightweight metal with high carbon content for vital areas, resin-hardened leather for ribs and shoulders, thin sheets of treated wood for silent reinforcement. These materials also reduced noise, making movement almost inaudible. Matte finish and dark tint. Nothing shone. Nothing stood out. Greek accounts speak of Persians who moved like shadows, a direct reference to the understated appearance of this armor. Adjustable side cords, allowing the armor to be adapted to the warrior's body, increasing comfort and maneuverability. Tactical role among the immortals. The shadow veil lamellar was essential not only for protection, but as a tool for tactical dominance. It allowed for fast runs without getting out of breath. It facilitated silent maneuvers on rocky terrain. It protected against horizontal cuts from hoplites. It absorbed impact without transferring vibration to the body. It was perfect for formation combat and infiltration. It allowed for quick switching between bow, blade, and spear. It avoided sun reflections that would give away its position. While a hoplite had to fight inside his armor, the immortal fought through from her. She expanded her capabilities. Greeks record something revealing. They surrounded us before we even heard their footsteps. This was only possible because of the shadow veil armor. Why did he disappear? The shadow veil lamellar was made from a large quantity of organic materials. After the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire, the leather rotted, the wood dried out and splintered, wires disintegrated, metal plates were melted, entire pieces were looted as exotic curiosities. Furthermore, when Alexander took control, Persian armor was replaced with Macedonian equipment, discarding centuries of local technology. Thus, the armor that allowed the immortals to fight with supernatural speed has almost completely disappeared, surviving only in scattered fragments and descriptions given by impressed enemies. Armor as light as silence, and as resilient as the very empire that created it. If all the weapons of the immortals carried mystery, discipline, and advanced engineering, no piece symbolizes the legacy of this legendary army more than the king's final sigil, the ultimate artifact that united political authority, military command, and absolute loyalty. It wasn't a traditional weapon. It wasn't a blade, a spear, or an axe, but it was, paradoxically, the most dangerous object that any immortal could carry. The sigil was a small metal plate, circular or oval, attached to the chest, forearm, or belt of the elite warrior chosen to directly protect the king. The piece was not used for attacking. It ordered attacks. Each sigil represented the power to mobilize units, alter formations, and in some cases, execute military orders without further consultation. It was, therefore, more deadly than any sharp blade. With it, an immortal could command hundreds of lives. The Greeks mention warriors who fought with the king's gaze upon their chests, and this phrase, long considered metaphorical, is now seen as a direct reference to the sigil. Characteristics of the king's final sigil metal plate with authority inscriptions, sigil displayed, real, inscriptions, Achaemenid symbols, and specific markings of the reigning king. Each piece was unique, non-transferable, and recognized by the entire guard. Darkened metal with a bright core. Fragments suggest a darkened metallic alloy with a silver center, creating a symbolic contrast between shadows, the troops, and light, the king. Irreversible fixation system. The sigil was permanently bound to the warrior for the duration of his service. Removing it without permission was considered treason. Symbolic weight, not physical weight. Despite its light weight, the sigil carried immense responsibility. The bearer was the direct extension of royal authority on the battlefield. Tactical role among the immortals. Although it wasn't a weapon, the sigil had a direct military impact. Gave the bearer the authority to reorganize formations. It allowed for the execution of real orders without intermediaries. Designated the warrior as the direct protector of the monarch. Unified. Morality and discipline around a single point. It served as absolute identification amidst the chaos. For the enemies, eliminating the bearer of the sigil was a psychological victory. For the Persians, protecting it was an absolute priority. Some Greek accounts state that when the bearer of the sigil fell, 10 would appear to take his place. The historical truth isn't so literal, but the prestige of the object was undeniable. Why did he disappear? Sigil disappeared for obvious reasons. Many were buried with their bearers. Captured artifacts were destroyed by enemies as an insult to the king. Organic materials from the fixations were lost. Corrosion of the metal erased essential inscriptions. Few specimens existed, and even fewer survived. Furthermore, with the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire, the new Greek forces did not preserve Persian royal symbols. They destroyed them. The final sigil represents the literal and symbolic end of the Immortals' weapons, a small, silent piece of equipment, but capable of moving an entire army, an invisible weapon made of authority, and it died along with the empire that gave it meaning. If you enjoyed delving deep into the hidden history, lost weapons, and military engineering of the Immortals, subscribe to the channel, Blades and Shadows. Leave a like, share the video, and comment on which country you're watching from. Your interaction keeps this journey through humanity's forgotten weapons alive, and allows us to continue uncovering secrets that time has tried to erase. See you in the next investigation into the shadows.